Do you think there are significant differences in the way police interact with minorities and non-minorities? Chief Stanley, let's start with you. Is there a difference in how police officers interact with different groups of people?
Yeah, Ron, from my perspective, no. And I've been all over the state, and I know that it's a tough question because I think perspective is everything. And so I think, let's say for an example, and I shared this story not too long ago with others, that if there is a neighborhood that has, let's say, a drug trafficker in it, Ron, and that drug trafficker has been selling heroin out of that house for a long time, and everyone on that street is scared to death to cooperate with the police. So then the police try to do their own surveillance, their own investigation, and it becomes harder and harder and harder to get into that house to root out that problem from the neighborhood. That takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of technique, but it still goes back to relationships. So when I answered that the way I did here at the beginning of it is that I believe that, at least from my town perspective, we treat everybody the same. What we're looking for is criminal indicators. I don't care if you're black, white, Hispanic, whatever. We're looking for the people that are out there trying to destroy what we've been working for. So everybody in this room has their own perspective of what you've been working for and what it means to you to be in a safe community, a safe school. We just did safety drills this week in Bellefontaine City Schools. They're not easy anymore. It's challenging. So what that is all about relationships.
Okay. We have a couple of questions here.
And anybody.
Young lady, you want to stand up and tell us what your name is?
Hello, everybody. I'm India again. My question was to you. You said that you don't think that police officers interact differently with minorities. But when we see what's going on now, like even minorities they're getting harder sentencing than the white people are who are killing people's children. And there's white people who are committing the same crimes as the colored people are, but when they're restrained, it's calmly with no force. But when they come after minorities, it's always they have their guns pointed at them, and they're always using extreme brutality. So I want to know, how exactly do you figure that they don't act differently?
Great question. And what I would say to you is that just a word of caution, because what I see on the national media is exactly what you see. What I see is a lot of potentially really bad policing at times, okay? And we up here, we see that. We understand what bad policing is, believe me. And when we experience it as chiefs, our job becomes that much more serious. We have to interact, we have to find out and investigate our own folks, and in some cases, bring in an outside agency to investigate our folks and determine what's wrong. But to your point about how people are sentenced and a different community approach, what I would say is use caution, because in some instances, judges have been put into a position where whatever that history is, I don't know what the history is, for example, of one municipal court judge or a common police court judge, of what their track record is of sentencing. But exactly what you're talking about is what we're trying to look at as a state. I just got appointed to the Sentencing Commission down to Supreme Court, and we're going to be having those discussions. It's already been going on. I'm just a new member. I'll punt to these guys.
And I know everybody wants to get into this, and this is probably the reason we're all sitting up here and the reason you guys are here. I have to kind of come to the aid of Chief Stanley here. Perspective is everything. Perspective is everything. And if all you see, whether it's through social media or through the media itself or through your interactions in your community, is that negative aspect of policing, then that's all you're going to know. So that's your perspective, which is a valid perspective. But what I do have to say is that it's not always true. Your perspective is what your perspective is, by what your experience is. But it does not always comport with the facts. And the facts are, there are a lot of Caucasian people that are in similar circumstances as African Americans or minorities when they're basically approached by police officers. Now, is that a majority? Probably not. Are there some things that happen with minorities that should not happen? Absolutely. Are there more, is it more slanted towards those things that happen negatively towards African Americans and other minorities? Absolutely. And that's why we're all sitting here to say we have to take a look at that, a deep look at that, and see how we better police our communities, see how we better interact to see what our communities actually want. Back to that community policing philosophy. So everything you see out there is not always true. Everything you encounter personally, of course, that's your truth. But Chief Stanley is talking about his community in Bell Fountain is different than your community. Where are you guys from? Lake County, and different from our experience in Cuyahoga County. So your perspective, I'm sure, is absolutely right. And your police agencies in Lake County need to do a better job of how they police, just like we need to do a better job in the city of Cleveland, and that's what we're committed to doing. So that question is kind of the reason we're here for this whole thing, but you have to put it in perspective. And again, everything that I see out there on the internet, it may be pro-police, and I may say, yep, they did a great job, but it may not be a great job because I wasn't there. And I don't know the ins and outs of what exactly happened. So I try to save my judgment until I have all the information. But if you're having that experience in your community, then we, meaning law enforcement, the NAACP, the Urban League, need to do everything we can to change that because we have those experiences in Cleveland. I see them every day. I look at all the body cam footage of my officers involved in use of force. And sometimes they treat people differently, whether they're Caucasian or African American. And by differently, I mean not within the rules and regulations of what we require as a police division. Not professional, not respectful. And that happens to African Americans and to Caucasian Americans in the city of Cleveland. And my job is to change that so that everybody is treated exactly the same.
Thank you, Chief. There's a question here at this table. I'm coming back there.
Hello. So I'm here, the advisor for these kids, and I'm going to follow up. So my kids, they actually have gone to nationalizations. They go and sit with judges. They're on Leadership Lake County. So they have a very broad perspective, not just negative, also positive. So this is what they're seeing. And as you stated, this is their perspective. We are not going to deny in our black community that we are over-policed, no matter what a panel sits up and says to us. We see it every single day. We see the disparity in sentencing. I have requested for transparency in our court systems. I'm very good friends with a lot of judges, and they have to go in and face their own biases. Where are your cultural intelligence? Where are your social intelligence classes to compound some of this racial bias that is there? It exists. No matter, I understand what you see from your perspective because you stand on an opposite end than we stand. But the end that we stand on, it's not just national news. We have cousins that get sentenced 15 years for having marijuana in their pockets. And today, opiate users get to go to mental health facilities and go home to their parents. Now you rip families apart, African-American families. These are traumas. I am a social worker, and we're talking about ACE testing and trauma-informed unit responses. Now we have our kids who have come up without their parents because they were ripped from their families and sent to prison rather than medical treatment like we're doing now. So there is a very broad, very big perspective of what is going on in our African American community that has happened historically and systematically to what is going on today, and it continues to be a very big bias in our community. And until we start to form, like that young man said, coalitions, and start actually having these elephant in the room conversations that they exist. And my kids, they see it, they know it. Today, they see their friends getting deported, their friends' parents getting deported. This is where they are. So we have a very big breakdown of what's going on in the police force and what they're doing in our communities, and they want to see a change, and I also too as well.
All right. I know the chief wants to jump back in this, but real quick, you guys are from Euclid. Oh, okay. But I mean, Lake County is, okay, all right. I was about to say Euclid is right, our neighbor, right next to Cleveland. I just wanted to make a couple little comments here. The sentencing disparity thing, we know that's been going on for a long time. A lot of people are fighting to get that changed to make it more equal. My challenge to folks when they talk about the system, because the system is broken, the system needs to change, is who is that judge that's not sentencing properly, and how did they get elected to that office? And what are we doing to vote that person out of office that's not doing it properly, to vote the right person into office? Because and I know in the interim, we're trying to change that person's biases to make sure that they sentence properly and fairly, but we shouldn't have to change that. We should make sure that that person does their job by the letter of the law when they raise their right hand and swear, you know, I'm going to uphold the laws and do things the right way. But if they don't, we need to vote them out. And if the mayor of City Cleveland puts me in charge of the police division and I'm not doing my job, then the mayor needs to kick me out and you need to vote the mayor out. So it goes back to, we have systems in place that aren't fair, and the only way to change those systems are to change those systems and the people in them. So if we're not voting, if we're not doing the things that you guys are doing, that you're talking about doing, and not just your group, but everybody, then we're doing a disservice, and you know, we let these things happen.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I agree with you, Chief.